From Manulife, we have Ian Taylor and John Natali. Take it away, gentlemen.
For those of you that don't know me, I spend a lot of time working with advisors on different kinds of insurance planning situations. And as part of my role, I often work with advisors who are very successful supporting the personal insurance market, but they haven't really been involved with corporate situations. When an advisor like this gets an opportunity to discuss insurance planning with the owner-manager of a private corporation, I may get called and ask this question: Ian, what do I need to know? And based on that, we're going to have a conversation. So what do we talk about? Well, as a starting point for me, I know the advisor understands the benefit of life insurance in personal planning situations. So I want them to know that life insurance can also provide significant benefit in corporate situations. So how do I do this? Well, I do it by creating a scenario I know the advisor can relate to. So I'll say to the advisor, let's assume you have a client who is a male age 50 non-smoker, and he wants to buy $1 million of low cost, low risk insurance for family protection. If you were to run a product illustration today, what would the IRR or the death benefit be at his life expectancy age 84? And when I ask that question, I almost always get the same response. Ian, it's probably going to be around 4%. And I'll go, you're right. I agree. It's going to be around 4%. Then what I say is, let's now assume the client's tax rate is 50%. And instead of investing in a life insurance policy, we're going to take the insurance premiums and buy a taxable investment that earns interest income. What rate of return would that investment need to earn to provide the client's family with the same $1 million at life expectancy? And the advisor is going to say to me, well, based on a 50% tax rate, if the IRR is 4%, then that rate of return in the investment is going to have to be around 8%. And I'll go, you're right. It's going to be around 8%. Then what I do is I'll switch gears a bit. And I'll say, let's take the same scenario and do the same analysis, but let's change one assumption. Instead of the policy being personally owned, let's now assume the policy is owned by a private corporation. Based on this new assumption, what rate of return would that same taxable investment need to earn to provide the family with the same $1 million at life expectancy age 84? And you can imagine the surprise I get when I say, well, if we assume the funds from the investment are paid out as a taxable dividend, then the investment would need to earn around 12% to provide the same $1 million as the life insurance policy. And I'll advise that the reason why that rate goes from 8 to 12% is because of tax rules that apply to shareholders of private corporations. So in creating this scenario, I find this simplified approach is a really good starting point in helping the advisor see the value of corporate-owned insurance. So now that this has been my starting point, I can now talk about the corporate insurance market and how significant it is and why life insurance is so valuable supporting it. To get at these issues, I begin by talking about the current tax environment. In the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a consistent trend we have seen with tax rates. And that trend is that personal tax rates keep getting higher while corporate tax rates get lower. If we look at current personal tax rates, the highest tax rate for income like interest, salary, pension income, that kind of income is in the 47 to 55% range, depending on which province you live in. For dividend income, the highest rates range from around 42% to 49%. When we compare these rates, personal rates to corporate tax rates, we see something very different. Active business income, that's corporate income over 500,000 or 600,000 if you live in Saskatchewan, is taxed in the 23 to 31% range. And for active business income taxed at the small business rate, These rates range from around 9% to 12%. So after I share this information, I often get this comment from the advisor. Well, Ian, this is all very interesting, but what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that low corporate tax rates mean more corporate retention. And what I mean by this is that these corporate tax rates are causing business owners to keep more money in their corporation versus paying it out. I mean, if you think about the business owner, they're no different from the rest of us. They don't like paying tax, and they certainly don't like paying tax at a very high rate. So to deal with this issue, what we see happening happening is that business owners are taking income based on what they need to meet their personal cash needs, and then keeping the rest of the money in the corporation. And with successful businesses, this money left in the corporation is often being used for investment purposes. So these tax rates, these low corporate tax rates, have created an environment where many successful business owners are using their corporations to create a nest egg. They are using their corporations to stockpile cash for the next generation, for those that they care about the most. And if you think about it, I mean, this really does make sense. If the corporation earns, let's say, $100,000 and is only paying tax at the small business rate, so let's say that the Business in Ontario and that rate's around 11%, then this potentially leaves $89,000 in the corporation to invest. If that same $100,000 was paid as a bonus or dividend to the shareholder, and we've talked about those high corporate those high personal tax rates, so that income is taxed at a high rate, then that may only leave around $50,000 to invest. If that same $100,000 was paid as a bonus or dividend to the shareholder, and it gets taxed at a high rate, we only have $50,000 potentially left over. And this also applies to larger businesses. If the corporation paying tax at, let's say, 26%, then we still have around $74,000 available to invest versus that $50,000. So what's happening is that difference in tax is causing corporations to retain funds, and a lot of those funds are being invested. So what's interesting is that even though this planning makes a lot of sense, it's creating a new problem. How does the business owner get this growing wealth out of the corporation to loved ones without them having to pay a lot of tax? Because as we've discussed earlier, personal tax rates are high. Wouldn't it be great if we could address this issue? And this is when I talk a bit about corporate-owned life insurance. I know the advisor understands the taxation of life insurance, the benefit of tax-deferred growth, the tax-free nature of the death benefit, and that certain policy transactions could result in tax having to be paid. So I'll mention things like if you do a policy withdrawal, or if you did a transfer of ownership, or you surrender the policy, that could result in a taxable policy gain, which is going to create income that the policy owner is going to have to deal with. That's going to result in tax. And then what I do is I'll confirm that in the business market, these issues definitely still apply to corporate-owned life insurance, but there are other issues that apply as well. So for example, I'll mention things like that the cash value of the policy is treated as a passive asset that could impact whether or not our client, the business owner, can take advantage of the capital gains exemption. I'll mention that the cash value of the policy is included in the value of the corporation for purposes of valuing the shares at death, and that the death benefit, less the adjusted cost basis of the policy, creates a credit to the capital dividend account. In my mind, I don't think it's possible to discuss corporate-owned insurance without talking about the CDA. I mean, the benefit of the CDA is significant as it allows the corporation to pay funds to the shareholder tax-free. If a corporation receives $1 million of death benefit and the ACB of the policy is zero, the credit to the CDA will be $1 million. This allows the corporation to pay $1 million out tax-free versus paying it out as a taxable dividend. And certainly whenever you talk to new advisors, I talk to new advisors about this, they get it. And it creates a lot of excitement. So when I get to this point of the conversation, I find that the advisor is anxious to ask me one final question. And that question is, Ian, this is all great stuff. How do I help my client understand the benefit of corporate-owned life insurance? And my response to that is always the same. If you ask me this question today, tomorrow, a week from now, I'm going to answer it the same. And I'm going to say, you show them corporate estate bond. So what is corporate estate bond? Well, from my perspective, it's an insurance concept that makes corporate-owned life insurance exciting. And I can tell you, I've been in the business for a long, long time. I don't have gray hair because I'm young. And I can say to you, life insurance is not always exciting. But I find corporate estate bond is exciting. And I say that because it has supported some of the largest life insurance sales we've ever seen at Manulife. As discussed, life insurance can be an attractive alternative to taxable investments for a corporation with excess liquid assets that are not needed for operations. I love the corporate estate bond concept because it takes a simplistic approach in helping the client understand this issue. It really is a great starting point for a conversation with the client about the benefits of accumulating wealth inside a corporate-owned life insurance policy. It really helps the client understand the growing tax issue and the benefit of the CDA in addressing this issue. I often get asked by advisors if there are questions that they can ask that might help them secure a client meeting to discuss corporate estate bond. And I say, yeah, I'm sure if you talk to a number of different advisors, you would get a number of different questions that they like to use. But I said, I've got a couple that I think are effective and that I've been told are effective. So I said, one of the questions you can ask your client is, are you taking full advantage of the capital dividend account for the benefit of your family? Or are you doing any planning that addresses your need to switch your tax growth strategy to a tax minimization strategy? I mean, I'm told by advisors that I work with that questions like this are effective at disturbing the clients in wanting to hear more. And as they hear more, that will include a conversation about corporate estate bond and what it can do for them and their family. The final comment that I want to make is that many business owners will seek the advice of a trusted advisor before making a significant financial decision. And I can tell you in the corporate market, that will include, in many situations, the purchase of a very large life insurance policy. This trusted advisor is often their accountant. And I think it's important to know that the corporate estate bond concept has been around for a long time, and that the accountant is going to understand it and understand what the numbers represent. And I think that's really important. I should say, though, that in some situations, the accountant may ask for numerical analysis that does go beyond the scope of the concept. So, for example, they may say, okay, I get what this is doing, but can I get some additional analysis that considers alternative post-mortem planning opportunities? And the good news is that if this happens, it doesn't kill the deal. That corporate estate bond didn't take the analysis as far as the accountant wanted it to go. If this happens, we can help. And I say that because our tax, retirement, and estate planning services team is really well positioned to help you support the accountant and in providing this additional analysis if it's required. And I can tell you that at the end of the day, this analysis will still support the significant value that corporate-owned insurance provides. So that's everything I wanted to share. I've used up my 15 minutes. I thank you for that, and I really appreciate your attention.